And we'll be asking, what are we getting wrong about water and how do we get it right? Last week, a record-breaking drought caused rivers in China including the parts of the Yangtze, to dry up. This affected hydropower, halted shipping, and forced major companies to suspend their operations. So the question we're going to start with today is, what are businesses getting wrong about water? Joining me, I have Thomas Rebermark, Director of SIWI Swedish Waterhouse, and Harsh Sheth, who works with corporate water stewardship at WWF. So Harsh, what are businesses getting wrong about water?
Thank you to have me here first. I'm very glad to be on this CEV sofa. I think one of the biggest myths about business is that being sustainable business and being an effective business are two different things. These are not two different things. When organizations talk about being an operationally excellent, that's the same definition that they can apply for being a sustainable organization. When they say about product innovation, that's the same way you solve sustainable products. There is no reason, we always see this auto mode and eco mode on devices. The auto mode is the eco mode, so to say. And I think that's one thing that businesses get wrong.
And Thomas?
Well, I would generally say that the consensus is that water and water stewardship and its role in corporate value chains doesn't yet pose a strategic business risk. And corporates that acknowledge water governance and water stewardship and its role and part of its business, I would say that it enables them to actually create a competitive advantage. Including a socio-economic resilience that I believe they can actually affect their value chains and also their within their respective industries.
Okay, so there's both this putting out sustainability and water efficiency to one side from the business, and there's also this not seeing the risk there either. So these are two things that we see that businesses are getting wrong. And Harsh, given your work with corporate water stewardship, do you see then any emerging trends in any direction?
Okay, I'm going to bite my tongue on this, but the myth is actually a trend. A lot of organizations are these days talking about being water positive, and there's quite much explanation around it. But being water positive is not the way we can solve this through science. And if you look at the upcoming science-based targets, and if you look at how we are approaching from the science angle on this, being water positive is not the approach. Having a positive impact, yes, but physically water positive, it's a colluded concept.
Are we seeing any trends in action against for better water use and policy?
I believe for better water use, the hyper-local nature of water is what needs to be really understood. Water belongs to a watershed. So water use within the watershed is what needs to be explored properly to be able to talk about the positive impact on water. That is key to, busting this myth requires that kind of science.
And beyond seeing or understanding the sort of hyper-localness, to use Harsh's word, of water, do you see any further trends?
Yes, I think what we see with greenhouse gas emissions and science-based targets initiatives, they are gaining reach and momentum, but there are other targets beyond the global the greenhouse gas emissions that like water and biodiversity that must be reached and would benefit from the same attention and same momentum and same evidence-based goal setting as the other ones for business and industries.
Yeah, I think as water stewardship, we need to be inclusive. That cannot be underestimated. We just launched a report a few minutes back in our exhibition space where we talked about the water has always been looked in two dimensions, quality and quantity. There are so many other elements. We talk about biodiversity. You just mentioned WASH. You also mentioned biodiversity. There's a piece of governance, which of course SIWI has been working with. So there are other elements, and we need to be inclusive of this in our approach. So I think, yeah, we need to be, science-based targets is also a little bit narrowed down. We need to expand that argument a little bit.
Yeah, and I also believe that one thing that we have seen in the dialogue with corporates is that they've used to be asked questions about how they affected the water basins or the water resources. But nowadays it's shifting towards companies being asked, how is the water basin or the water resource affecting your operations? And I think that perspective also puts the water risk aspect very in a large content into their strategy work. So
it is. The protagonist is the antagonist.
Yeah.
It's switch sides. We talk about sites being affected by basins as compared to basins being affected by sites nowadays. Yeah.
Absolutely. And what actions are we seeing that businesses are taking? How are they interacting with the basins, working with corporate water stewardship on a more, say, global level? How do you see the approach that's being taken?
Within the WWF framework that we've been working with, water stewardship, we've been working with a lot of corporates. We see a evolving requirement to harmonize our programs, to be able to kind of not just work in one basin, one specific sector with one topic, but to be able to work across, because water risk is really evolving around the globe. And one risk is no less than the other one. The water running out in one place and another place having flooding, or the same place having both. You cannot avoid those. So we have to work in a portfolio action. So we are evolving with that lens, that we have multiple basins, multiple programs, multiple collective actions going on. That's where we are in our change process.
And how do we, in this approach where we look at, say, multiple basins rather than focusing on a single one, would there be any risk then of a one basin fits all approach?
Again, being inclusive is key. I do think that there has been, while we say global harmonization, a lot of work needs to go into local inclusiveness, being inclusive to local stakeholders, being inclusive to local partners. From global corporations and global organizations, it's easy to look down, but the solution is in the basin. It's coming down upwards. So I do think inclusiveness is quite key to solving this.
Absolutely. And we're talking about, say, global companies in your examples. Now, what about, say, mid and small companies?
I really embrace the larger companies' sort of engagement in this, but they have a leading role and they also have the global perspectives. But the smaller companies, what I normally call the long tail, small and medium-sized businesses with international operations, with components or raw material brought into their products or services, I think they don't have the resources to actually put into this. So I think there's a need for us in this hall and online seeing this as well, to support and help also this medium and small-sized business to actually be able to move into a larger water risk view, but also water activities and water solutions.
There's obviously a lot of, often we talk about scaling up, but then in some cases, of course, there's a need to be able to scale down.
Definitely, yeah. I think we sometimes lose track of the need of also scaling down sometimes and actually take away parts. And I think from that perspective, you can look into how to design, bringing in design, and have for this shirt, for example, have fewer buttons and scale down also in design phases on products and services.
And being able to scale this down to, say, hyper-local water, then we go back to what you mentioned, Harsh, about the need for inclusivity.
And I'm a bit conflicted in my process right now, but because we do need to recognize that our work so far has not been with small and medium-sized organizations as much. And as a person who's come from a business background, recognize that big business is built on the back of small business. So definitely, I think a more inclusive approach is required, not just from local stakeholders. I need to rewrite that statement that it's local stakeholders, including local small and medium enterprises, as well as global small and medium enterprises, which is family-run organizations and so on, which I think is something that we should be evolving on.
Absolutely, not least because these small or medium businesses may be impacted by the water use of larger businesses, but also can be subcontractors to larger businesses and are part of this bigger instrument, even if they are themselves a smaller business.
Yes, agree. Yeah.
And if there's now we've talking a little bit about what businesses are getting wrong, and it is a complicated and quite a demanding task to do this reset or these sort of actions that need to be taken. But now we have gathered in this room people from a huge range of backgrounds. I can't quite see everyone's faces, but probably from corporate, from policy, from the environment. We mentioned biodiversity being a big part of this as well, not just water. So if you wanted to, I can start with you, Harsh. If you wanted to say something to the people in this room, what they need to take with them, what the next step needs to be?
So the first piece there is we have been used to seeing our work evolve as water, climate, biodiversity, which is an evolving topic. And again, going back to one of my colleagues who mentioned something today morning, water is hyperlocal, biodiversity is hyperlocal. Solving these together is the real key to the question. Climate and water are not two topics, but climate is experienced through water. So we need to kind of connect these. I think that's one message to go out with. Starting off is not easy. Water risk filter is one of the tools, but there are hundreds of tools out there and lots of frameworks out there. None of them are absolutely perfect, but all of them are useful to a great extent. So you can start picking up from there, including things that we do, things that you do, Thomas, with SIWI. Yeah. So it really, there's a lot of starting material out there.
Thank you. And Thomas, do you have something you want to ask of or share with?
I think we all can conclude that we have the knowledge, we have the research, we have the methods, and we have the systematic approach. We know that the SDG or the freshwater is a success factor in sustainable climate transition. I would say that we are aware of the interlinks from source to sea. We know what we need to seek, that we need to seek collaborations and accountability as well from every stakeholder across these sectors and bring in dialogue. I would say that we are working on a report right now that's about the freshwater, the climate and mitigation aspects on freshwater, and I'm very much looking forward to launch that. See my colleagues launch that on the COP, but we have an executive summary that is already out there. So I think there's a lot of aspects we need to bring in relation to this, but actually, most of all, businesses need to evaluate water as a risk because it actually will affect their operations already now.
Now that I'm just spending a moment processing that, there are places where we do not know things. There are places where we do not have answers. The only way that's going to be solved is working together. And that, I think, if anyone is scared by the unknown, it's not going to solve anything. The idea is to embrace the unknown, embrace the known, start getting on the ground. You could be wrong to begin with. Better try and fail as compared to not try and fail. So
absolutely. And yeah, as we say, that the knowledge is there, and what we need now is the action, the collaboration.
Me and Harsh would love to be there to help you set this in motion. So contact us or our colleagues at SIWI or WWF, and we'll hear for you. So reach out.
Both SIWI and WWF have exhibitions here, so do go and talk to them. If you see us walking around, please come. And I know Harsh and Thomas have said they'll wait after this session to please do come and ask any questions that you do have. As we've said, there are methods and tools available for companies wishing to assess their risks. WWF and SIWI are working with companies on the forefront of this transition. And the more businesses that understand how they depend on access to clean water will have everything to gain from being water stewards. So thank you for joining us today, and I hope that we see you right here at the same time tomorrow and online as well. And tomorrow at 1 p.m. we'll be discussing the ongoing food crisis in Africa and the people that might be able to solve it. Thank you.